Today's story is about an absolutely insane, brilliant heist that left the entire world completely stunned. What makes this particular robbery so incredibly exciting is that it wasn't carried out by common thieves or some organized professional gang, but rather by a lone engineer who decided to single-handedly take on the most dangerous, ruthless criminal gangs across America and Mexico just to avenge his own family. Without firing a single shot from his weapon, and without even bothering to call the police, he chose to take his revenge in the most brilliant way imaginable, by stealing $22 million of their money and then simply vanishing into thin air forever. Because this entire operation was so incredibly clever, both the criminal gangs and the American and Mexican authorities collectively decided to keep all the details quiet, as what actually happened exposed their profound weakness and put them in a deeply embarrassing position before the entire world. But the biggest surprise of all was in exactly how the heist was carried out. It was accomplished through a secret, elaborate tunnel that he built himself with the help of two of his trusted engineer friends. A massive tunnel reaching 12 meters in depth and stretching out to as much as 600 meters in length, while directly positioned above this very tunnel stood the watchful US and Mexican border guards. In this video, you will discover how a bold architect dared to challenge the most dangerous gang in the world, and how he executed a genius plan that shocked everyone. Prepare yourself, because a series of intense events and unexpected surprises are waiting for you. Please make sure to watch this entire video right through to the very end. The events of our truly exciting story first began on November 3, 2010, at exactly 3:47 a.m. in San Diego, California, in the United States. A dedicated drug enforcement agent by the name of Marcos Halwi was sitting quietly in front of his thermal surveillance screens, carefully monitoring various warehouses, storage facilities, and empty parking lots. Everything appeared to be perfectly normal and quiet, just as it should be, but then, all of a sudden, he caught sight of something that simply made no sense whatsoever, a peculiar thermal mass that was shifting deep beneath the ground. And it certainly wasn't just some random, aimless movement, it was traveling in a remarkably and suspiciously straight line, as if there were an entire hidden world operating right beneath their feet, completely without anyone ever noticing. Marcos held his breath and focused intently on the monitor. Then he zoomed in closer to confirm exactly what was occurring, and it appeared to be something entirely unnatural. It was a thermal mass that wasn't just some faceless blob, but something moving in a perfectly straight path deep underground. This path was clear as day, starting from the Otay Mesa area in San Diego and extending in a straight line toward the southern Mexican border until it reached the heart of Tijuana. Marcos zoomed in further to focus on the details, and that's when he was shocked by the truth. What he saw underground wasn't just a cavity or an ordinary hole, but a complete engineering system operating efficiently. It is a truly terrifying, authentic tunnel that descends to a depth of approximately 12 meters. What is most bizarre of all is that the thermal imaging screen revealed highly advanced ventilation systems and an incredibly massive lighting network that is running non-stop. This is clearly not just some simple hand-dug tunnel. It is actually a giant, fully integrated engineering project. Marcos didn't waste a single moment. He went straight back to reviewing the old thermal archive recordings for this specific area. He went back 1 month, then 2, then 3, and he kept on searching through those records until he finally reached 6 months back. And that was when he found the real surprise. The tunnel had been completely active and fully operating for 6 entire months. 6 whole months, and yet not one of the authorities had even noticed them. At this very moment, Marcos began to look much more closely, and after a few moments, he discovered something that left him feeling completely and utterly shocked. The tunnel stretched out for approximately 2,100 feet in total length. That is equivalent to well over 600 meters. To have an underground passage of this immense scale operating secretly for 6 full months without a single person ever noticing it, it became absolutely certain that this entire operation was far more significant and much larger than they had ever initially imagined. Marcos immediately ordered the formation of an urgent investigation team, and when the team began studying the tunnel's details, they discovered it was more like a professional engineering miracle. The tunnel walls were heavily reinforced with layers of high-strength industrial steel, while the floor was constructed from solid, pressure-resistant concrete slabs, and directly overhead there were specialized passages and rail systems for transporting heavy goods. Massive ventilation fans were also installed at regular intervals along the tunnel, placed exactly every 100 meters, to ensure a constant supply of oxygen for the workers inside, allowing them to breathe quite easily. And at this point, the inevitable question forced itself upon us. Who exactly was responsible for building this vast underground city? And furthermore, who could possibly possess the sheer capability to construct a tunnel at such a truly terrifying and complex level? The shocking and truly frightening answer is this. It was not a project undertaken by some giant construction company, nor was it a secret government operation. In reality, this tunnel was built by one of the most dangerous and ruthless cartels in history, specifically the infamous Arellano Felix cartel. But hold on a second, didn't we initially claim that it was just one lone engineer who constructed the whole thing to get revenge for his family? Stick with me for a little while longer, because the truly juicy details haven't even begun to surface yet. The individuals responsible for constructing this tunnel were members of one of the most dangerous drug trafficking and smuggling syndicates operating between the United States and Mexico. The gang invested approximately $2 million to construct it, and remarkably, the entire project was carried out right under the very noses of the authorities. This tunnel served as their secret route for transporting illicit shipments between the two countries, and it took nearly 8 months of grueling, non-stop labor to complete. However, far more significant than the physical construction itself is the true identity of the individuals who actually managed to pull it off. The gang didn't simply hire a group of ordinary diggers. Instead, they employed highly skilled engineers from every conceivable specialty, including structural, electrical, mechanical, and complex ventilation systems. In fact, every single component of the tunnel was meticulously overseen by a dedicated, specialized expert. And of course, talent like that doesn't work for free, especially since the project is shady and full of risks. The criminal organization paid laborers and engineers massive sums to work alongside them, ensuring their absolute loyalty and silence. They shelled out $50,000 monthly to each engineer, a staggering amount capable of changing anyone's life forever. Because of this, every engineer worked twice as hard to keep such a lucrative position. Their intense dedication led to a stunning outcome, far exceeding our initial expectations and proving a massive success. The members of the gang possessed an absolute, unwavering faith that their vast fortune could easily purchase the loyalty of absolutely anyone living on this planet, but that was the single most fatal mistake they ever made. As the days went by, doubt started creeping into the engineers' hearts. The salaries were huge, the security was extremely tight, and the tunnel was designed with technical specs that were off the charts. That's when the big questions started echoing in their minds. What is so precious that it makes the gang spend all these millions on it? And the answer appeared suddenly and by chance in one of the corridors. One of the large bags had not been closed properly, so one of the engineers caught a quick glimpse of what was hidden inside. Thick, tightly packed bundles of cash. It was not just a matter of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, but rather millions upon millions of dollars spread across those 12 massive, heavy bags. This entire sum of money represented the illicit profits generated from the drug trade, which the criminal organization was currently preparing to transport down to Mexico. The gang operated under a very strict and highly specific system. Every 2 weeks, this massive amount of cash was moved through this secret tunnel, and the entire operation was proceeding perfectly until the night of November 3, 2010. The fateful night that changed absolutely everything. That very same night, one of the engineers, a man named Diego, received an urgent phone call from his cousin who works for the police department. He told him one single sentence that completely flipped the entire script on its head. He said, "The police have finally discovered the tunnel, and the big raid is scheduled for tomorrow morning." The call abruptly ended, and Diego was left frozen in his tracks, completely paralyzed by the sheer shock of the news. All of a sudden, he found himself holding onto a dangerous secret that could destroy absolutely everything. Diego was one of the primary engineers who had been tasked with the construction of the secret tunnel, but in reality, he was not working alongside that dangerous criminal gang of his own free will. The cartel was fully aware that he was one of the most highly skilled and brilliant engineers on the entire team, and they were prepared to go to any lengths necessary to ensure that he continued working for them. And with a man of Diego's integrity, money alone simply wasn't enough to sway him. So they decided to threaten him and told him in no uncertain terms, "Either you work with us or your entire family will vanish from the face of the earth." Back in those days, Diego was completely unemployed and solely responsible for supporting his entire family. That is precisely the reason why he found himself feeling forced to agree to their terms. $50,000 every single month is certainly not a normal or reasonable amount of money, and on the other hand, if he had dared to refuse their offer, his entire family would have been killed. He had no other way out but to accept the deal and live in constant fear for the rest of his life. Anyway, on the following night, November 4, 2010, at the stroke of midnight, Diego realized the police were planning to conduct a raid on the tunnel. At that moment, he found himself facing 3 distinct options, with each one being significantly more difficult and far more dangerous than the last. Option 1. He could choose to inform the gang immediately and provide them with a warning about the impending raid. By choosing this path, he would keep himself safe and maintain his status with the cartel, but in return, he would be helping them to smuggle the $22 million and get away with their entire criminal operation, completely and totally scot-free. The second option is to remain absolutely silent, not utter a single word, and simply allow the police to conduct their raid on the tunnel. However, within the brutal world of the cartel, a surprise raid implies that there is a traitor in their midst, and the ultimate price for that would be his own life, as well as the lives of his entire family. Yet, there remained a third option. A truly brilliant and utterly insane plan that would never, not in a million years, cross the minds of those gang members. Back a few months ago, when Diego first stumbled upon the discovery that those bags were absolutely stuffed with millions of dollars, a truly wild and crazy idea suddenly hit him, one that could potentially change his entire life forever. He pitched the whole plan to his two engineer friends, asking them, "Why don't we just beat the gang to the punch and take all that money for ourselves?" But they shut the idea down immediately, insisting that it was far too dangerous for them to even consider. They warned him, saying, "We are absolutely terrified of getting caught up in a street fight with some random thug, let alone trying to stand our ground against the most ruthless and dangerous drug cartel in all of Mexico. To take them on like that is nothing short of a guaranteed death sentence." So, Diego decided to drop the whole idea entirely. But now, following that truly terrifying phone call from his cousin, the idea has exploded back into his mind with even more force than before. Diego pondered the situation, thinking to himself, since the police are planning to raid the tunnel tomorrow morning and the gang is still completely unaware, that means I have only one night left, just one night to steal $22 million right from under the very noses of the most dangerous gang in the city. In that very moment, Diego made the most reckless decision of his life. But how on earth is he going to manage to pull this off with so little time remaining? The plan was actually quite simple, to sneak inside just a few minutes before the raid began and snatch all the cash from the very heart of the tunnel. It was essentially a dangerous suicide mission, because if they got caught, they would surely be dead. However, Diego viewed it as a truly once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Without a single moment of hesitation, Diego grabbed his mobile phone and called his friends who were engineers. The call didn't even last for 30 seconds. He simply told them, "Tomorrow night, right before the raid, we are taking all the bags and we are disappearing." His friends didn't have the slightest clue about the impending raid or what was actually going on behind the scenes at the time, but that one single cryptic sentence from Diego was more than enough to rally them all together and get them moving into immediate action. Barely an hour had passed before the three of them gathered together in complete secrecy. Diego looked at them and said, "I have finally finished counting all of the bags. If we take those 12 bags and multiply them by their individual size, I estimate there is at least $22 million in cash inside. Those bags are sitting right in the middle of the tunnel and we absolutely must move them before the police arrive on the scene to investigate." But honestly, that wasn't even the biggest problem we had to deal with. The real kicker was that the entire heist had to be pulled off without the gang ever finding out, and simultaneously it had to be finished before the police arrived on the scene. This meant that the three engineers would be stuck right in the middle of the chaos, caught directly between the cartel's heavy gunfire and a full-scale police raid. It was a risk of truly suicidal proportions, the sort of desperate gamble that only a complete madman or a truly dangerous genius would ever dare to undertake. And while Diego and his companions were busy putting the final, meticulous touches on this insane plan, something of far greater significance was already brewing somewhere else entirely, hidden from their view. It was 2 o'clock in the morning that very same night, deep within the confines of a highly classified, top-secret FBI Operations Command Center, where the primary leaders of the investigation gathered together to meet with a select group of 30 highly trained professional agents hailing from the Drug Enforcement Administration, alongside several specialized tactical units representing the United States Border Patrol. The tension in the air was palpable, and everyone was completely fixated on one solitary mission, raiding that godforsaken cartel tunnel. The authorities had been patiently waiting for an opportunity like this one for many long years. None of them could have ever imagined the truly brilliant method the Arellano Felix cartel was using to smuggle their contraband. The very idea of a secret tunnel had not even crossed their minds. Furthermore, the Arellano Felix gang is widely considered to be the single most dangerous criminal organization currently operating across both Mexico and the United States. If the tactical raid were to succeed exactly as planned, the criminal syndicate would effectively lose their primary smuggling route, along with all the massive capital currently stashed deep inside that tunnel. It was intended to be a definitive knockout blow that would completely cripple their entire illicit operation. The commanding officer, while carefully explaining the tactical plan over the map, stressed one absolutely critical point. There was simply no room for any error, and absolutely no information leaks could be allowed to reach the gang. However, the tragic reality was that the leak had already occurred, and the damage was done. What absolutely none of the high-ranking generals or intelligence agents present in that secure room could have possibly known was that, at that precise and critical moment in time, a trio of rogue engineers was secretly plotting to embezzle $22 million and disappear into the shadows, never to be seen again. On the morning of November the 4th, in the year 2010, Diego once again met up with the two engineers, Hector and Luis. The three of them had been working together, deep underground, for 8 long straight months, so they had come to trust one another completely and blindly, and they knew every single inch of that dark, winding tunnel. Diego laid out the plan, telling them, "The raid is definitely happening tonight, which means we are working within an incredibly narrow and restrictive window of time, specifically between the hours of 8 and 10 p.m. During that brief 2-hour period, we must successfully infiltrate the site and relocate every single cent of that cash located right in the center of the tunnel, 12 heavy bags containing a total of $22 million in cash. And this brings us to the most pressing question of all. Exactly how much time do we actually have to work with? Because Diego, who served as the lead structural engineer overseeing this entire tunnel project, was fully aware that the maintenance crew performed their routine security checks every single night before they headed out, and knowing that once the clock struck 8 p.m., the tunnel would be left entirely deserted, he realized this was their ideal window of opportunity to make their move. However, Luis and Hector remained entirely unconvinced, as the total weight of the bags amounted to roughly 480 kilograms of cash, which were distributed across 12 massive, heavy-duty bags. Diego then intervened to soothe their growing anxieties, remarking, "The strategy is quite simple, yet it is also incredibly dangerous. We are forced to move only 2 bags at a time, which means we will have to make 6 consecutive trips from the middle of the tunnel all the way to the end toward San Diego. Diego's plan could actually work if absolutely nothing goes wrong, but it is still completely insane, because he is talking about pulling off a heist right under the cartel's nose, just mere minutes before a massive police raid. It is completely impossible, or there must be absolutely zero margin for any error. The slightest slip-up would mean certain death. The main point is that he was 100% confident in his entire elaborate plan. The plan was laid out like this. At 8 o'clock in the evening, they were to enter the tunnel from the Tijuana side in Mexico, using his usual work cover as a front, inspecting the ventilation systems. Simultaneously, Hector would make his entry from the San Diego side, claiming he was there to perform some routine railway maintenance. And I want to remind you once again, the tunnel entrances on both sides were being carefully concealed deep inside those secret gang warehouses. Just imagine if they happened to run into one of those gang members while they were coming out carrying all that stolen money, it would surely be all over for them in an instant. The remainder of the overall strategy involved Diego and Hector meeting up right in the center of the underground tunnel, and once they were there, they were to begin loading all of the heavy bags onto the specialized transport cart that was waiting on the railway tracks. Then they would proceed to push the fully loaded cart all the way towards San Diego, where Luis would be patiently waiting with a truck to take the heavy bags directly from the cart and hide them securely inside. After that, Luis would immediately drive the truck away to a warehouse that they had rented beforehand using completely fake names. By doing it this way, exactly 15 minutes prior to the start of the raid, the tunnel would be left entirely and completely empty, and the $22 million would have vanished from the cartel's grasp. For those 3 engineers, $22 million was absolutely worth taking such a massive, dangerous risk. The entire heist had to be pulled off completely undetected by the gang, while simultaneously ensuring it was finished well before the police could arrive on the scene. Achieving this kind of success would fundamentally alter the course of their lives for the rest of their days, and they knew it. But the real question that haunted us was this: would everything truly go according to our original plan? The answer finally began to reveal itself on that most decisive of nights, November 4th, 2010, at precisely 8 o'clock in the evening. Starting from the Mexican side of the border in Tijuana, Diego descended into the dark tunnel, clutching his heavy flashlight and his 2-way radio. Up above, at the entrance of the warehouse on the surface level, 2 heavily armed cartel guards stood watch over the area, while the secret tunnel stretched 12 meters deep directly beneath their unsuspecting feet. Diego descended into the darkness, moving quietly until he finally reached the very bottom of the tunnel, where he then proceeded to walk for another 300 meters deep underground. Suddenly, he caught sight of the 12 heavy bags that were neatly placed against the wall, illuminated by the flickering lights that ran along the length of the tunnel. With his heart pounding wildly in his chest, Diego cautiously approached the bags and reached out to unzip one of them. What he saw left him completely stunned: thick, overflowing stacks of $20, $50, and $100 bills. He grabbed the radio and asked, "Hector, are you ready to go?" The reply came back to him instantly: "I am already in position." Hector was standing right there, waiting on the San Diego side of the border, and that was the exact moment the operation finally began. Diego loaded the first 2 heavy bags onto the iron cart and pushed them with all his might along the track, heading towards San Diego. He sprinted across those 300 meters in the blink of an eye, quickly unloaded the entire shipment alongside Hector, and then bolted back through the tunnel like a rocket so he could retrieve the next batch of supplies. However, the real issue wasn't just the distance we had to cover, it was the fact that the entire operation had to be executed with extreme speed while remaining completely silent. The tunnel was completely deserted at that hour, and even the slightest noise would echo and carry, particularly the screeching sound of those heavy iron cartwheels grinding against the metal tracks. But the most significant danger we faced was that lone gang guard stationed right by the warehouse entrance, watching over everything. If this guard were to hear even the slightest hint of strange movement, the entire plan would surely collapse. Even though he was stationed up top and might easily notice any slip-up by the engineers, they had no choice but to work as fast as they possibly could. With the heavy police raid closing in on their position, the first group of shipments departed at exactly 8:23 p.m., followed shortly by the second batch, which managed to arrive safely at 8:37 p.m., and then the third one followed at 8:51 p.m. The three engineers were strictly sticking to the original, carefully laid out plan, and everything was proceeding quite smoothly and according to the established, masterfully crafted, and highly efficient operational schedule. But then, all of a sudden, the radio crackled to life, and the voice of a cartel guard came through the speaker, asking, "Diego, are you still inside the tunnel?" Just imagine Diego's precarious position in those truly terrifying seconds, drenched in cold sweat, standing there right next to the heavy bags of stolen cash. He held his breath, trying to steady his nerves, and answered with a forced artificial calmness, "Yeah, I'm still in. I am just performing a routine check of the ventilation systems in Sector 4. The guard remained somewhat skeptical and decided to press him further, stating, "We require an immediate and comprehensive update regarding the current status of the entire site." He had begun to hear mysterious noises emanating from deep underground, so he requested an investigation to determine what was occurring within the tunnel. Diego retorted immediately, "Everything is completely under control. Just give me 20 minutes and I will have finished the entire inspection." However, at that very moment, there was a major shift in the original plan. Diego had expected the guards to vacate the warehouse just as they usually did at the end of the evening, but tonight, things were quite different. They had decided to remain inside the building. This sudden and unexpected modification escalated the inherent danger level to a truly significant and alarming degree, yet the entire operation pressed forward regardless of the mounting risks we were facing. The fourth batch departed at exactly 9:03 in the evening, which was then followed by the fifth batch at 9:16, and finally the sixth and ultimate batch departed at 9:28, effectively concluding the entire process. By that point in time, every single one of the 12 duffel bags had been stuffed to the brim with cold, hard cash, which amounted to a grand total of $22 million in currency, and they had already been transported across to the far side of the tunnel, heading straight towards San Diego. Now, you might be tempted to think that the mission was over, but the truth is that the story is only just beginning. The most difficult and dangerous part was still waiting for them just outside the tunnel. The guard had not yet left his post, and Luis was waiting for them in a truck. At the very same time, the authorities' massive raid was rapidly approaching, and numerous U.S. Border Patrol units were swarming everywhere, significantly tightening their security perimeter in the entire area. Meanwhile, Diego finally reached Hector, and together they immediately started lifting all the heavy bags using the hydraulic lift toward the warehouse, and then they quickly headed up to the roof with the bags in tow. But as I mentioned to you earlier, there was a bit of a surprise. The San Diego warehouse actually still had one guard on duty. Because the money had already arrived at the warehouse and the guard was standing right there outside, they had to find a way to distract him and get him out of the picture. So what exactly was the solution to this problem? That is where Luis, who had been waiting in the truck, finally came into play. He stepped out of the vehicle and headed straight toward the guard. The guard knew him well, so Luis sat down next to him and started chatting about work and general things, just to clear away any suspicion. In the middle of their conversation, Luis pulled out a bottle and offered it to the guard, saying, "Why don't we have a drink together?" But the guard's bottle had been spiked with a potent, fast-acting sedative. They kept drinking and laughing as if nothing unusual was happening. Minutes later, the guard drifted into a deep, unconscious sleep. At that very moment, the three of them, Diego, Hector, and Luis, finally sprang into immediate, perfectly coordinated action. In a frantic span of just 90 seconds, they managed to load every single one of the heavy bags into the back of the waiting truck. At exactly 9:31 p.m., the truck pulled away with Luis driving off all alone, leaving them with only 29 minutes remaining before the inevitable police raid finally began. While Luis was busy driving his vehicle away from the scene, Diego and Hector made their way back to the entrance of the tunnel for one final, thorough inspection. They carefully shut the secret door, wiped down all the surfaces, and meticulously cleared away every single fingerprint and trace of evidence. Everything was finally back in its proper place, except for one glaring, impossible thing. The 12 heavy bags containing the gang's entire fortune had completely vanished into thin air. Immediately after they departed from the warehouse, each of them decided to go their own separate ways. Diego crossed the border and headed back home to Tijuana, Mexico. Hector vanished into the busy, crowded streets of downtown San Diego, while Luis was busy making his way in the truck carrying all those millions in his possession. By the time the clock struck 9:45 in the evening, the entire tunnel had been left completely deserted. The stolen money had vanished without a single trace, and neither the police nor the gang had the slightest inkling of what was about to unfold. In just a few short moments, the critical 0 hour had finally arrived. Agent Holloway's tactical team arrived, ready for the high-stakes raid. 30 armed federal agents stormed the warehouse, descending into the dark, winding tunnels, all anticipating a brutal confrontation and fierce resistance from the cartel members inside. They were fully prepared for a brutal underground street war, but the chilling shock that awaited them made their blood run cold. The tunnel was completely empty. No contraband, no gang, no illicit drugs, and not a single trace of the money. The gang had planned to move the cash the next morning, but those three engineers had beaten everyone to it and stolen it all first. The agents walked through the heart of the tunnel in disbelief, taking in this professional engineering marvel: ventilation, lighting, railways, and eerie soundproofing. A whole project underground. However, after spending 3 long, arduous hours of meticulous searching, the final result proved to be truly strange and utterly baffling. They discovered faint wheel tracks left behind on the rails and a small amount of dust clinging to the walls. But there was absolutely no sign of the gang, no sign of anyone at all, and not even a single solitary dollar to be found. The exhaustive search and the ongoing investigation dragged on deep into the night, and every single person present was thinking the exact same thing. Given that we raided the tunnel and discovered absolutely nothing, it clearly implies that the gang had been tipped off about our raid well in advance. But the real burning question that remains is this: why on earth didn't they just blow up the tunnel, and for what possible reason would they allow us to uncover all of their most sensitive, hidden secrets? They simply did not have any kind of logical answer to provide. The official report that was released later stated, "The tunnel was successfully discovered and secured, but there was absolutely no money, illegal contraband, or any gang members to be found." This implies the 3 engineers managed to slip through the fingers of the police. Since the US Border Patrol confirmed that nothing was found, the gang posed a shocking question. They wanted to know who exactly stole the money. They asked who the person was that approached the guard and handed him that drink which knocked him out, and who was the second person who kept stalling over the radio, saying, "I will be up there in 20 minutes." The answer that I received was shocking. It turned out to be Diego, the lead engineer on the project. The bitter irony is that the guard who was stationed at the warehouse door was apprehended while he was fast asleep, and the second guard, who had been busy talking to Diego over the radio, was also taken into custody, effectively ending both of their careers behind cold iron bars. The cartel eventually started connecting all the dots, but the truth only came to light a bit too late, simply because the entire operation was kept strictly top secret. Following the raid, a suspicion began to circulate among the security officers that the gang was obtaining information from within the system, suggesting a significant intelligence breach and a very serious leak, which was particularly alarming, especially since the operation had been planned in absolute secrecy. However, what no official report mentioned at the time was that 3 genius engineers managed to steal $22 million from right under the nose of one of the most powerful cartels in the world. It was a heist pulled off completely undetected, without the gang knowing and without the police ever catching them. But the question is, how do you escape the iron grip of the Arellano Felix cartel? The notorious gang whose very name struck terror throughout the entire region, and who were ultimately outsmarted by a most precisely calculated operation. The real surprise was that the theft concluded at 9:30 p.m., while the raid commenced at 10:01 p.m., and did not finish until 1 a.m. Even with all that, the members of the gang remained completely unaware of the unfolding disaster until the following morning. Then, at exactly 8:00 a.m. on the morning of November 5, 2010, several cartel employees arrived at the tunnel site, expecting to start their shift, but they were absolutely stunned and horrified to find US police officers already surrounding the entire area, and in that very instant they finally realized that their secret tunnel had been fully discovered and exposed. That was the precise moment the gang's investigation began, and they discovered all 3 engineers had vanished without a single trace. Diego was last seen crossing the border into Mexico, and after that he simply disappeared from our view, never to be found again. There are no credit cards, no phone calls, and absolutely no social media accounts to be found anywhere at all. It is as if he simply evaporated into thin air. Hector has also disappeared, and when the crew went to search his apartment down in San Diego, they found the place completely empty, with all of his personal belongings gone, even though his lease had not yet expired at that particular time. As for Luis, the American police eventually discovered his truck in the Chula Vista area. However, the shock was that the vehicle was left completely spotless. There were no fingerprints, no traces of DNA, and no evidence, as if it had been professionally scrubbed clean. The 3 of them simply vanished, taking $22 million in cash with them. Out of sheer shock and the massive amount of money, the gang decided to cooperate with US security agencies to track them down. But the cartel never managed to track them down to exact their revenge, and the local police were never able to apprehend them either. They have managed to remain completely free to this very day. However, the most shocking and unexpected surprise is that Diego had already managed to smuggle his entire family to safety long before the night the raid took place. This is precisely what opened the floodgates to a wave of theories. Many believe Diego orchestrated everything from the start, and that he was the one who cunningly tipped off the police about the tunnel through his cousin on the force, a scheme they concocted together to steal the millions and vanish without a trace. A second prevailing theory suggests that the engineers involved fled the country immediately, heading straight down to Central America, specifically seeking refuge in nations such as Guatemala or Honduras, where the extradition laws are significantly more lenient and it is remarkably simple to purchase a brand new identity, a fresh name, and a forged passport, allowing them to begin an entirely new life from scratch. A third prevailing theory suggests that the cartel tracked them down, executed them, and managed to recover all of the stolen money in total secrecy, without leaving behind even a single shred of public evidence. However, a number of seasoned experts argue that the cartel intentionally manufactured and spread this specific rumor simply to save face and to ensure that no one would ever dare to steal from them again. The fourth theory is, without a shadow of a doubt, the most bizarre and strangest of them all. It suggests that those three engineers are actually still living right here within the borders of the United States to this very day, but they are currently hiding under assumed aliases in a very quiet, upscale community, tucked away far from all the constant, overwhelming hustle and bustle of the city noise. And the total sum of $22 million was divided up in equal shares among them, which resulted in each individual person receiving approximately $7.3 million. A sum of money of that magnitude doesn't just guarantee you a life of comfort, it guarantees that you can vanish from the face of the earth forever. Regardless, the final outcome was absolutely catastrophic and deeply humiliating for the entire Arellano Felix cartel. They lost everything they had. They ended up losing $22 million in cold hard cash, the tunnel that had cost them $2 million to construct, their primary smuggling route, and those two warehouses located on both the Mexican and American sides of the border. On top of all that, they also lost the brilliant team of engineers who had designed and built that highly reinforced underground tunnel. In short, they suffered a truly devastating knockout blow that completely destroyed their influence in the region. As for the American authorities, despite celebrating the success of the historic raid, they returned just 48 hours later and completely filled in and sealed the tunnel to protect the border. In this complex operation, everyone won something and lost something else. But the ones who really knew how to play this dangerous game to the end were those three engineers. 8 long months of grueling construction and execution, living under constant threat while being paid $50,000 a month each. When the perfect moment finally arrived, they turned the tunnel they had built with their own bare hands into a lethal tool for cold revenge, calculated theft, and total disappearance. And this brings us to the most significant and pressing question in this entire narrative. Exactly how could we possibly know about all of these private conversations and the hidden, secret details that transpired between them? The shocking truth was revealed by a Brazilian journalist who claims he met Diego just 2 months after the incident at a secret location. Diego recounted all these details to him with great precision, and then he vanished completely, without leaving behind any clue regarding his future destination. He only told him how they pulled off the plan and didn't say a word about their fate. One of the sentences Diego told the journalist that really stuck in people's minds was, "The cartel thought they were buying loyalty with money and fear, but they forgot that if a person works while their family is threatened, they will never be loyal. They will continue to wait patiently for the perfect moment to exact their revenge, while the three of us have already managed to secure our own retribution in our own unique way." So perhaps this was never merely an ordinary heist story, but rather the tale of a simple engineer who was blackmailed and ultimately decided to deliver a knockout, truly humiliating blow to the most dangerous men in the world. Men who once foolishly believed they controlled absolutely everything. And you, dear viewer, share your opinion with us in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to our channel to receive all the latest updates.